There are 20,129 confirmed aggregate cases of coronavirus in Victoria since the beginning of the pandemic. That is 12 new cases since my update yesterday. 5 of those 12 are linked to known outbreaks and complex cases. 7 are under investigation and 1 was reclassified. Of the 5 cases linked to known outbreaks, 3 are linked to outbreaks in aged care. 2 are linked to a complex case related to Greater Dandenong. I'm sad to have to update you that there are now 782 Victorians who have passed away as a result of this global pandemic. That is 1 further death since my last report, a female in her 80s. We of course send our condolences and best wishes to that family. That fatality is linked to aged care. There are 53 Victorians in hospital. 9 of those are receiving intensive care and 5 of those 9 are on a ventilator. A total of 2,651,309 test results have been received since the beginning of the year. That is an increase of 16,027 test results since yesterday. That's a very strong number, and I thank each and every one of those more than 16,000 Victorians who the day before went and got tested. That is such an important thing to do. Thank you to each of them, and in advance, thank you to every Victorian who won't delay. They will simply go and get a test as soon as they register even the mildest symptoms. It's a big, big part of us being able to get to that COVID normal. For instance, it's a very big part of the announcements that I'll be here tomorrow to make, announcements that are all about safety and taking steady, gradual, cautious steps, but without a clear picture through a strong testing program and those numbers remaining strong, we can't take those steps. So again, any symptoms, please get tested and please don't delay doing that. In terms of mystery cases, there are 4,270 cases with an unknown source. That's an increase of 2 since yesterday's report. There are 72 healthcare workers who are active cases. We wish them well and we thank all of them and their colleagues for the work that they do. There are now 444 active cases across the state, so that number continues to come down. Regional metro split. There is 1 case in a regional local government area under the 3rd step. The total number of active cases in regional Victoria is 10, and the rolling 14-day average to 25 September is metro 23.6 and regional just 0.8. Everyone will of course recall that in order to take the next step tomorrow, we had been targeting a 14-day rolling average that was between 30 and 50, so it is fair to say that we are somewhat ahead of schedule. But we'll make further announcements tomorrow around those matters. Active cases in disability facility settings, there are 4. That remains constant. They're all staff members. Active cases in aged care, some 231 active cases. If I can now, I think that's all in terms of data of the day. There will be a Chief Health Officer's release that will go out soon. Now I want to turn to a couple of other matters. Firstly, as you're aware, Jenny Mikakos resigned this morning. I believe that was the appropriate course of action for her to take. I want to take this opportunity to thank her for her dedicated service, for her hard work. She's a very, very hard-working person, and I'm grateful to her for her efforts. I'm grateful to her for her contribution to the Parliament and to the people of Victoria and to our party, and I wish her well for the future. I have asked Martin Foley to become our Health Minister, and he will be sworn in just after we finish our media conference today. There will be other ministerial arrangements in terms of a replacement minister for Jenny Mikakos and some consequent portfolio changes. I'll make those announcements at the appropriate time. But I thank Martin and I acknowledge the hard work that he has done as a DHHS Minister in the portfolios of mental health and others, and I think that he is well equipped to be right at the forefront of our fight against this virus, and in my experience he has the skills, the background and the absolute will to see this strategy through. Before we go to questions, I just want to make a couple of comments about where we find ourselves. I will be back here tomorrow and I will make announcements that will be proof positive that this strategy is working. I know it's not easy. I know it's tough on many, many people. But ultimately, we're getting these numbers down. They are coming down. They're coming down perhaps a little faster than what we thought. And that is a credit to every single Victorian who's staying the course, doing the right thing, following the rules, and is, just as I am, determined to find that COVID normal. And that's still a few weeks away. But we are going to find that COVID normal and it's going to be able to be locked in. And that's the most important point. Today's not the day for me to make announcements. There'll be meetings later on today and into the evening to finalise those details about what next steps can be safely taken, and I'll announce those tomorrow morning. I don't know that there's anything more that I need to say, so I'm more than happy to take your questions.
Did you ask Minister Mikakos to resign?
No, Minister Mikakos resigned. I didn't have an opportunity to put that to her, but as I've indicated to you, I believe that was the appropriate decision.
Can you tell us why you believe it's an appropriate course of action?
Well, again, I don't want to be getting ahead of a process that I appeared before yesterday. There'll be a report, and I'll leave it to the report to detail, make findings, make recommendations.
But you've obviously come to the view in your own mind that it was the appropriate course of action. Why is that?
Well, again, I'm not going to comment on those matters until I've got the report. I believe that Jenny's made the right choice, but she made that choice, and I've taken the opportunity, and I'll take it again, to acknowledge hundreds, thousands of hours of work, a dedicated person, a person absolutely focused on her important roles, and I'm grateful for that. She's made her decision, and that is the appropriate decision. As to detailing further, it really is a matter for the inquiry to make its findings. It is a matter for the inquiry to come to conclusions, to make recommendations, and as you know, that is not today. That will be in about 5 weeks' time.
Yesterday you made it clear that...
Would you have asked for it?
Well, again, she has resigned, so that didn't really become an issue.
Was she given an ultimatum by your office last night to consider her position?
No, I don't believe that's accurate in any way.
Yes,
I did not speak with the Minister before she resigned, and I have not spoken to her since. She sent me a text. She's resigned. She's no longer a minister.
What did she say in the text?
Well, I think you would understand that I'm not necessarily going to be going into those details. It was simply to inform me of the fact that a letter had been sent. I was already aware of that.
She hadn't called you? You didn't speak to her via phone?
Simon, as I've just said, and I don't know that I could be any clearer, I did not speak to her, and I have not spoken to her since.
Do you have confidence in the other ministers that have appeared before the inquiry?
Let's do it one at a time.
Throughout the hotel inquiry, you've heard the words shared accountability. It's been said over and over and over again. Jenny Mikakos has resigned.
Yes.
Who else has to go?
Well, I've not made the point about shared accountability. I've made the point repeatedly about the ultimate accountability is with me. In terms of the decision that Jenny's made, that decision is made. And now a new health minister will be sworn in, and we will continue the very important work that we have to do. This pandemic doesn't take a break. It doesn't rest. We can't either. We've got to push forward and get this strategy done, get these outcomes delivered, and that's exactly what I'll be here tomorrow to talk about.
She's adamant that she's not to blame for the entirety of this failure.
Well, again, that's a matter. She's free to make comments. She's free to have a view. And with respect, I am free, and I believe that it is appropriate for me to wait for the findings of the Board of Inquiry. That is a very important process, and that is one that is not yet finished, but it will be finished soon.
You haven't waited until the conclusion of the inquiry or until the findings of the inquiry to come to a conclusion that Jenny Mikakos' resignation was the appropriate course to take.
Yes.
So,
but what I'm saying, Samara, is I'm not going to. Well, the fact that my judgment on that matter doesn't change the outcome. Whether I thought it appropriate or not, she resigned. She resigned this morning, and I believe that is the appropriate course of action. And she obviously believes that's the appropriate course of action. Otherwise, she wouldn't have taken it. Beyond that, though, what I'm saying to you is I'm not going to, and I think you would all appreciate, because you've been writing about this for quite some time, including yesterday, about a whole range of issues, and I'm not going to run through a list of different issues, many of which are not actually established yet. That's the job of the inquiry, and the inquiry will come back and will make findings. What they find, I can't speak to that. That's entirely a matter for them.
You said she had accountability, or you believe that she had accountability for the hotel quarantine program. Do you think she's also accountable for the second wave of the coronavirus pandemic
I'm
here
not
in Victoria?
going to be getting into that sort of commentary, Samara. If you want to draw that conclusion, then that's a matter for you.
Is
But
that a
I
correct
don't believe.
conclusion to draw then?
Sorry.
Is that a correct conclusion to draw?
I'm indicating to you that if you want to draw conclusions, then you can make judgments about whether they're correct or otherwise. I'm not going to be providing commentary like that. I don't think that's appropriate.
Yesterday the Minister had your confidence, and today you say it's the right thing that she's resigned. What's changed?
Well, the Minister's tendered her resignation, James.
But you believe
as
it's
simple as that.
appropriate that she did so, where yesterday she had your confidence.
All my ministers have my confidence. Ms Mikakos is not a minister any longer. She has made a decision. She has resigned. And as to details of what motivated that, you'd need to speak to her. As to details of the facts of these matters, they are rightly the province of an inquiry, and my job is to wait for those findings and then take the necessary action based on those findings to make sure that the mistakes that have occurred here can never occur again. As I've said, guys, I don't know how many days it is now I've stood here, and I'll be here tomorrow and the next day, and as long as it takes, the best way to go, one at a time, and I'll answer them as best I can.
Thank you, Premier. Yesterday in the inquiry, you said in your written statement that you held Ms Mikakos responsible for the Department of Health and the hotel quarantine program.
I'm aware of my statement, yes.
Had you made that point to her months ago? Or was this...
It's a statement of fact, Rich, so therefore it ought to have been obvious to everybody involved.
So
What?
did she, like this is the point I'm getting at,
I know what you're getting
had
at.
you made this clear to her that she was responsible for this program when it was set up?
My statement yesterday is a statement of fact, and the operations that I referred to and the conclusions that I drew and the comments, the statement I made and the oral evidence I gave should have been perfectly obvious to all involved. And just to that point, I'm not sure whether you were watching yesterday, but there was an organisational chart put forward. There were lots of different things put forward. I don't think what I'm saying is at odds with the facts of the matter. In fact, they are absolutely clearly the facts of these matters.
So why weren't you able to tell us that when we've been asking for months who was responsible for this program?
Well, there's an inquiry, Rich, and it's not appropriate.
Set up. We were asking for months who was responsible, and it's as your statement says, it's a very straightforward answer. So why weren't we able to learn that earlier?
Well, again, Rich, as I've said to you many times, there's an inquiry going on, and I made the judgment that I was not going to be answering questions that were absolutely central to the work of the inquiry. That's not appropriate. It's not appropriate. And as to speculating beyond that, then that's in the past. Those matters, I've made a statement. I have, beyond that, given evidence for whatever it was, 2.5, 3 hours or so, and I outlined, to the best of my knowledge and ability, the facts.
In
So
Ms
you knew she
Mikakos'
was
statement this morning to the media, she said there's elements in your written statement to the inquiry yesterday that this is her quote, that I strongly disagree with, and I can't believe that I cannot continue to serve in his cabinet. Now to us, to me, when I read that this morning, that was a fairly broad attack on you. Why didn't those sorts of issues or, disagreements between responsibilities and this sort of detail, why couldn't that be sorted out, and now we're at this point?
Well, the Minister's statement doesn't provide detail. She makes comment. I'm not in a position to speculate on what she's referring to. All I can say to you is I appeared yesterday and I provided a statement. I did so under oath. Yeah. And I can't comment on what she's referring to.
Where was the breakdown, though, between your relationship with her and her relationship with you?
Well, again, she's the one that's asserting that. You'd need to speak to her about that.
In the interest of getting to the bottom of what went wrong, should she be recalled to the Board of Inquiry to explain what she means by that, given that you've got the Health Minister's evidence, evidence...
That's entirely a matter, that is entirely a matter for the Board as to what they seek to do. I understand she's made a second statement to the Board. That's a matter for them.
So
So do you believe that she was accountable for the hotel quarantine program? We've asked you this question on multiple occasions. You haven't answered. In PAEC and on several other occasions, Jenny Mikakos has consistently said it was shared accountability and it wasn't her sole responsibility. But she's been Health Minister up until right now, and she wouldn't have been deposed if she hadn't resigned. I guess, why were Victorians putting up with a Health Minister who didn't even know what her job was or her role in the hotel?
Samaya, the minister's resigned. I've indicated to you I believe that's an appropriate decision to have been taken. A new Health Minister will be sworn in, Minister Foley, in just a few moments, and that's what I'm focused on. That's what I'm focused on. You've got obviously a very important job to do, but it is a slightly different job to the one I do. I'm focused on getting on and making sure that we've got very positive news for people tomorrow and a series of safe steps that I'll outline then.
When did you first realise that she wasn't aware of her full accountability of the hotel quarantine program?
I couldn't say exactly when I became aware of that, but her statement today speaks to that. Her evidence at the inquiry speaks to that. I'm not, to be honest, Mayor, I've not spent a lot of time trying to work that out, trying to go through the dates of it all. She's the one that's referring to differences, and her statement is her statement. And if you want further information, only she could elaborate on that. I'm not in a position to.
Do you still have confidence in the Secretary of your department, Chris Eccles?
I do. Chris Eccles is an outstanding public servant, and I have complete confidence in him.
Can you clear up some confusion about that? You said that you hadn't seen his email and he hadn't alerted that to Phil Gagens during the inquiry.
Correct.
On March 27 and 28, you made comments publicly about being thankful for ADF being offered, and I know you've answered questions around this a few times.
Indeed, I have.
What did you actually think was on offer then? And yesterday at the inquiry, when you were saying that this might have changed how you viewed things if you had have got this email from Mr. Eccles, what did you mean by that?
Well, so there's a few things in there. Obviously, if you don't have information, then it can't influence your decision making. So I don't know whether it would have, but as I said yesterday, I would have liked to have known, and I did not. In terms of your broader question around the
March 27 to 28,
yes,
you sort of thanked the Prime Minister.
No, I did, and I'm more than happy to take you through. I left the National Cabinet meeting. It was very clear to me that we would, and I want to stress this. I want to stress this very, very carefully, so that if there's anything written tomorrow that might give the impression of criticism, that would be wrong. This is not a criticism in any sense. And I won't go to the details of discussions at National Cabinet, but I'll speak to you about what I took away from that meeting, having been in that room. There would be some support, the exact nature of which I could not tell you, but there would be some ADF support for New South Wales as a result of the following factors. More planes arriving in New South Wales than arrive in Victoria. Cruise ships. You would remember Ruby Princess was very much a live issue at that time, and indeed many cruise ships were being diverted to Sydney. They already have. That's a big feature of the way things work in Sydney as well. The exact nature of that support, I didn't know then, and I couldn't tell you now. But it was very clear to me as I left the room that we should not expect substantial, extensive support. At the press conference shortly thereafter, the Prime Minister made a more general offer, and I acknowledge that. And that's the start and the finish of it, Matt. And that is not surprising in the context that we have right the way through this received different levels of support, different types of support from the ADF, all the way through performing different roles, different functions, and I'm deeply grateful to them. And whenever we've asked, so they haven't necessarily turned up the following day, it does take some time, but they've been quick to get here, and they're doing an outstanding job. And I think my last briefing had a number around about 1,000 that still remain with us, and we're very grateful to them.
Did the Prime Minister sorry.
No, I was just going to say, but when you suggested the inquiry yesterday that it might have changed things had you been aware of the nature of what was offered to Chris Eccles, what might have changed?
Well, I can't be certain about what would have changed. The point I was making was, I think I was asked a question, might that change things? I can't give you a word for word on it, but what I can say, if I had known that, well then that was very, very different to what we all left the National Cabinet meeting very clear on, and again I stress, this is not a criticism in any way, but that's what I took away from the National Cabinet meeting. And a week later, a different position was advanced that was not drawn to my attention, and I would prefer that it had been. I can't speculate about what that might have meant, but again, if you don't have information, then it's very difficult to do that. It's very difficult to have a different view or to go a different way. I probably can't say much more than that, Matt.
That
When
same
you
day,
said
though, you
Victoria-
mentioned the use of security guards, private security guards in that program. Do you really expect us to believe that that just slipped out and that there'd been no discussion prior to that of the use of
No,
those
that's not what I'm expecting you to believe at all, Rachel. I answered these questions yesterday, and I've got nothing to add to my answer. I cannot give you a specific... I cannot detail for you why it is I mentioned police, why I mentioned security, why I mentioned the public health team, and didn't add in a fourth or a fifth or a sixth different group. I think it's important, though, to acknowledge that just a half a sentence later, I made it very, very clear that these matters had not been settled, and it was not until the next day that I came out and then made announcements about what had happened. I think that's relevant.
Can I just go
Say
back to the
that
question
again.
I asked before? We're still in the middle of the second wave.
We are.
We're still locked down. Why is it appropriate for the Health Minister to have resigned today?
Well, the Health Minister has decided to tender her resignation. That's happened. I can't change that. We've got a new Minister that's going to be sworn in very soon, and I want to assure every single Victorian that there's a lot of work going on, and we'll have meetings right into the night this evening in order to finalise arrangements for announcements that I'll make tomorrow.
Why was it an appropriate decision? Why is it an appropriate decision today? We're still dealing with...
Well, I would direct you to the statement that the Minister's made. The Minister's made a statement about no longer being able to serve as a Minister. She's resigned. That's an appropriate thing for her to have done. As to what may or may not be found, what may or may not be the conclusions of the board, that's entirely a matter for them. And it is, I know it's frustrating, but that's not today. That's in 4 or 5 weeks.
Have you had a conversation with Jenny Mikakos at any point in the past few months where you've asked her to improve her performance or to do things differently, given that the first hotel outbreak happened in May? You were of the view that she was responsible for that operation. Any conversations since then about what's going on, Jenny?
I don't believe I've had many conversations with her and colleagues over a very long period of time. I don't think I've needed to have a conversation like that. I don't think I have had a conversation like that. I've spoken to her and other colleagues literally hundreds and hundreds of times in the last few months and during the course of this year.
The first outbreak from the Regis Hotel was in late May. In her testimony, she said she waited until June 30, or in her statement, sorry, she waited until June 30 to seek, further information from her department. Do you think it's appropriate for her to have waited a month, or had you spoken to her about the security guards?
I think it's appropriate, Samaya, that given that matter, as you say, you're quoting from her statement and all her evidence, it's appropriate that Judge Coate make findings potentially.
It's her media statement, not her statement to the inquiry.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, in her media statement
Her media statement today.
today.
Yeah, well, I can't add anything beyond that. If you want to know what drove the words that she's used and background to these matters or any other context, then you'd need to speak to her. I do not, Samaya, with the greatest of respect, I do not propose to be providing interpretation on a statement that I neither had nothing to do with the writing of it, and all I've done, like you, is read it.
Between late May and June 30, when she had asked for her department to explain to her what was going on in these hot hotels, had you spoken to her about what was going on and why there was an outbreak?
I couldn't be certain whether I'd spoken to her. As I said in answer to James's question, I speak to colleagues very, very, very regularly. Very regularly.
So you don't remember when you last had a direct conversation with her?
No, you asked me a question about not just whether I'd had a direct conversation, you asked me about whether I'd raised a specific matter. When did I last have a conversation with her? I've been attending meetings with her for weeks and months. Weeks and months.
But a chat?
Well, given that we were... Well, I'll just make this point to you. Given that we were going to be appearing in a process as witnesses. I don't think I've had a conversation with her this week. I think I've been I know I've been very, very careful not to be engaging in discussions with people who would be appearing, which I believe is the appropriate thing to do.
And that goes to a point Councillor Sisting made yesterday. It's unusual in a government inquiry to have different departments and different ministers, each represented by different lawyers. This means everyone had a different story to tell, right?
Well, if you want to draw that conclusion, that's fine. That's a matter for you, James. I've given my evidence. I've given my statement. I've outlined the facts, and what I can add to that is to say to you that the strategy that we've put in place is working, and I wouldn't want anyone just to skip over the fact that we've had the highest test results this week, which I've just reported to you, and we've had 12 cases. That is a very good day, and one that sees us poised tomorrow to make substantial announcements, and I'll be back before you to do that.
Do you, do you have the confidence of Kim Peake, the Department Secretary?
Yes.
Were you frustrated, or were you worried that she wasn't telling Jenny Mikakos, briefing her on issues within the department?
Well, again, it'll be for others to find whether there was sufficient briefings.
You think she may have been misleading the inquiry then? She said she wasn't passing up
No, I'm not making that claim at all, Rich.
Well,
No, it's not.
You're not worried about that? That she wasn't passing on information?
Part of the problem is because I hadn't finished the sentence, I wouldn't invite you to infer that, because that's not what I was saying. As to the adequacy of briefings and the flow of information and all of those matters, I'm going to wait until Judge Coate produces her report, and I'm not in any way directing or wanting to steer where that report goes, but that may well be a matter that she directly goes to.
Just in terms of what you said yesterday about Graham Ashton's opinion that police might not be used for hotel quarantine at the very beginning of the scheme, and that DPC had decided that was a different model. He told an AFP officer his text messages show, and you said that would be unusual, or that wasn't the case. How do you think he got that impression?
I can't speculate. I was shown text messages yesterday, and I answered appropriately, accurately, fairly. Again, if you want to know why he composed those text messages the way he did, then you would need to speak to him. I'm not in a position to be able to reflect on that.
Is it just a coincidence that he communicated that he had that impression an hour and a half before you gave a press conference mentioning that it was the case that it would be private security guards and not police?
Well, no, but see, Rachel, that's not what I said. That's not what I said. You just took me to effectively a quote, and I did not say that at all. The words I used that day included reference to 3 different groups of people.
Apologies.
So I did not at any point. This is a very important point, and if I can make it, if you're putting it to me that I indicated at any time that police would not be involved, that's simply not right. I did not make that comment.
I am putting to you that you mentioned the use of private security.
And I've freely acknowledged that in my statement under oath, in my evidence yesterday. And as a matter of fact, I'm not sure whether you were at the press conference. You probably were. So no one's debating the words that I used, but no one should also skip over the fact that only 5 seconds later, I made it very clear that these matters had not been determined, and therefore I would not be able to announce all the details of the package. It was not until the following day that I was able to do that.
Just with the DPC, Chris Eccles.
Minister's resignation.
Yes.
What will happen with her seat in Parliament, and where does it leave you and the government in trying to get your omnibus bill with the controversial detention, or some people call it controversial, the detention powers through?
I'm grateful for that acknowledgement.
Got it qualified.
Thank you so much. That's very good of you, Simon. We will have a process to fill that casual vacancy, as you know, under the provisions of the Constitution. There's no by-election. There'll be an internal party process. These are extraordinary times, both the virus as well as some other matters that have seen some changes to the way our party's administered, but we'll have a replacement into that seat in the Legislative Council, and it will be my expectation that we would be able to have that finalised before the Parliament next meets.
Speak to Minister Foley, please. Just on that
Again,
point,
we seem to have strayed back into
Sorry.
everyone wanting to have a go at the same
I just
time.
want to follow up, if that's all right.
Of
Just
course
on-
you can.
Yeah, just on the omnibus.
Oh, and sorry, I didn't answer that party question. In the issue, in terms of the upper house and the consideration of that bill, it has, as you know, been my long-standing practice not to try and be a predictor of what happens in that chamber. We'll continue to work in good faith and to negotiate, talk, answer questions, do all of those things.
Have you had
And
progress?
sorry,
Have you had any progress with that, with the crossbench?
I'm not in a position to report progress, whether it's been good, bad, or indifferent. I don't have an update on that. We continue to engage as we always do with the crossbench, and I'm always grateful to them for the fact that they work with us to work through issues.
What about those, on those issues? Sorry, Rich. On those issues, like we've had lawyers come out, the bars come out, 14, 18 different QCs have come out against these detention laws.
Yes.
Have you listened to those concerns, and are you looking to allay some of those fears from the top, from the legal?
Well, as I
peers?
understand it, the Attorney General had a meeting with a number of representatives of the legal establishment, the legal community, and it was my understanding that at least some of the concerns that had been raised were dealt with. I'm more than happy to get the Attorney to come back to you if you need any further detail on that.
Premier, given
Rich,
thank you. Sorry. Given you've the local voting rights of members is suspended in the ALP at the moment in Victoria,
Yes.
how will that process of the candidate chosen? Will that be your nomination to the National Executive?
The National Executive will make the final decision, but it will be important that a process is opened up so that people who want to be considered for that position can be. The exact details of that, Rich, I think you would appreciate that. I've tried to answer the question as honestly as I can, but I won't be doing that work. I've got quite enough to go on with dealing with the responsibilities that I have. But it is my expectation that we'll have that vacancy filled before the Parliament next seats. That'll be the aim. Whether that can be achieved really is a matter for others.
Could we speak to Minister Foley, please?
You absolutely can.
Sorry, can I just ask the Premier a follow-up question on that, and then another question? Would you like a woman to replace Jenny Mikakos in Parliament?
I think my record in relation to the advancement of women in our party and our government is well known, and ultimately it'll be a matter for the National Executive to determine who should fill that seat. But I note that I'm very proud to say that I chair a cabinet that is more than 50% women, and a caucus that's, when last I was briefed on these matters, I think very, very close to 50%. That is important. It's very important. And my views on that are long held, and they're not just views, Samaya. I can point to significant achievement in this regard, and it is a point of pride. But there are rules in the party. I'm not sure where sometimes they're quite finely balanced in terms of quotas and things being met. I haven't looked at that issue, but let's wait and see how that unfolds.
I wanted to also ask about the breakdown of the relationship between department secretaries and their ministers. DPC Secretary Chris Eccles hasn't briefed you about the offer from from the Commonwealth. Kim Peake hasn't briefed her Minister Health, Jenny Mikakos, on a number of things. Emergency Management Victoria Commissioner Andrew Crisp didn't tell Lisa Neville about the request for 850 ADF personnel. Is there a breakdown between the relationship, a breakdown of the relationship between secretaries and their
No,
ministers?
I don't believe so. Just if I run through those three for you. Firstly, the example that you've cited in relation to Secretary Eccles and myself, I wouldn't read that to mean that he doesn't brief me, or that he doesn't. It's one instance, and it's out of character for him. He's an outstanding public servant, and I don't think it is fair to reflect upon all of the work he does through that one incident. In terms of Kim Peake briefing her ministers, again, I can't speak to that, and I don't know that necessarily Commissioner Crisp ought to be considered a secretary of a department. He's not. He's a statutory office holder and has different accountabilities and different. He's also an outstanding person in my experience, but there's not an equivalence, I think, in terms of the three people that you've put forward, with the greatest of respect.
Andrew Crisp is obviously a very senior member of Lisa Neville's team.
Yes, he is. He is, but I don't know that you can't put him in with other secretaries. I think he has a very different role, and there's an independence to that role that I think complicates the construction that you've put forward.
Is it a shame that all of these very senior public
You're next, James. Don't worry, I'm coming to you because it means I get to go over there and Martin comes here. So you will be next, I assure you. Samaya, yes.
Is it a shame that a lot of these very senior public servants haven't briefed their ministers and yourself on very important matters of the hotel quarantine program and responding to this coronavirus pandemic?
I think I made my expectations about the provision of information very clear yesterday, and that remains my view. Now,
Minister
James, would you like to speak to the new Health Minister?
Please, I would love to.
Very good.
Minister, congratulations. You've just been made Health Minister in a pandemic. Does that feel daunting to you?
Well, I haven't yet been made the Health Minister. The Premier has kindly made me that offer, and I'll wait till the Governor goes through the appropriate processes. But we are in the coming off of the second wave of a global pandemic, which Victorians have made enormous sacrifices to get us to the point where we're now on the edge of a significant statement that the Premier will make tomorrow. I want to acknowledge the great efforts that Victorians have collectively, in a community coming together, driven down those numbers faster than the roadmap out had forecasted. And I think the efforts of Victorians are to be congratulated. The efforts of the Victorian community built on the enormous hard work of our health professionals and the entire public health and private health community that have come together under enormously difficult circumstances to achieve what they have achieved is outstanding. And I look forward to working with those professionals and communities to continue the driving of those infection rates down so we can get a COVID normal, a COVID safe reopening of Victoria underway, and in doing so build the kind of health system that we would expect Victorians want to have to keep those infection rates down, and that's exactly what I'll be doing.
Your soon-to-be former portfolios fall within health and human services as well. Have you figured out how to get that department and its secretary to tell you what's going on?
I have nothing but confidence in both the Secretary and the Department, and I look forward to continuing a very productive relationship with them.
Have you sought assurances from Ms. Peake that she was passing? Have you sought assurances from Ms. Peake that she was passing on all information to you, unlike what was happening with Minister Mikakos?
I have every confidence that not only Ms. Peake but all the professionals I deal with in the Department of Health and Human Services to provide all the information and support I need.
Premier, can we bring you back to the lectern? Sorry, Mr. Crowley. Congratulations.
Yes, Simon.
Premier Andrews, what?
The record will reflect that you congratulated the Minister, yes?
Okay. Premier, there have been calls from Michael O'Brien, the opposition leader, and many others for you to resign out of this. Will you resign?
No, I will not. I don't run from problems and challenges. I've got a very important job to do, and that is to continue to get these case numbers down, and then to begin the biggest recovery project that our state has ever seen. I don't run from challenges, Simon. I've got a very important job to do, and I'm going to get it done. We are going to have not only a situation where we can make announcements tomorrow, but then, on the trajectory that we're on, the trend that is there, through the hard work of Victorians, we will be able to take further steps next month. We'll be able to find that COVID normal, and then we will hand down a budget later this year that will have the biggest, the most significant program of investment that this state has ever seen. It will be truly unprecedented, both in its size, scale and nature, and that's what's needed. This is a 1 in 100 year event. So my answer to your question is no. I have an enormous amount of work to get done, and I'm going to get it done, because that's what I do, Simon. I get on and get things done.
Some of your Labor Party MPs felt that your testimony yesterday left Jenny Mikakos with no choice and are feeling pretty bruised by the whole process. What's your message to MPs that are feeling pretty rattled by this whole process?
I don't send messages to MPs at press conferences, Rich.
Is your party unified?
My colleagues know and understand who I am, what I'm all about, and my record. I don't think it's appropriate. I've never done it before. I'm not about to start speaking to my colleagues with respect, all of you people. That's not the way my government works.
Is your party unified?
Absolutely, and has a singular focus on defeating this second wave, and then, as I said to Simon, beginning the biggest repair and rebuilding agenda that this state has ever seen. And, you know, we've had the Governor of the Reserve Bank, Federal Treasurer, the Prime Minister, the head of the Federal Treasury as well, all making comments about the need for states to do more. We will do more, be in no doubt about that. It will be a very, very substantial program of investment to repair the damage that this pandemic has done across our state, not just in terms of building and infrastructure, but it'll be about training and skills, and it'll be about supporting people at a very personal level to find the job that they want and to make sure they've got the skills they need for that job, as well as driving confidence and getting our economy growing again and getting us back to where we are at our best, when we're out in front leading. There's 500,000 jobs created in this state in the 5 years before this pandemic hit. The engine room of the national economy is right here in Melbourne and Victoria, and we know we have a significant responsibility both to our community but to the nation, and we will deliver as never before.
Given there's been so much in the inquiry, we've heard about shared lines of responsibility, or is it time to move away from the CCC and go back to a cabinet government for this crisis?
No, the CCC is the appropriate way to make quick decisions that are, by the nature of this pandemic, absolutely essential. I wouldn't want you to draw the inference, though, or to come to the conclusion that only a small number of ministers are working hard. Every single minister is working hard in their portfolios and supporting CCC members and dealing with much of the non-pandemic related work that is a feature. Just because we've got one massive challenge doesn't mean all the other challenges we face without a pandemic can be put on hold. And I'm deeply grateful to each and every one of my colleagues. Ministers, yes, parliamentary secretaries and indeed caucus members more broadly for the work that they are doing. There's lots of different tasks. They're all working very hard, and I think our state is stronger for all of those efforts.
You're working on the announcement you'll make tomorrow. Is your emphasis more on getting particular industries back to work, or on freedom of movement and people mixing?
We are consistent with the types of easing that's been foreshadowed in that roadmap, James. So there's no dramatic departure from that. But there are a couple of areas where we can say and do more, and we will finalise those this evening, and we'll be able to talk about those tomorrow. And I do hope, again, I don't want people, we're not throwing the doors open tomorrow. The place is not opened up tomorrow, and I've tried to be really clear about that. But people can be optimistic and really positive about the fact that these numbers are coming down. They are coming down, and once you get them low, you can keep them low. That's what the science and the logic tells you. But I do hope tomorrow to be able to talk a little bit more about what October looks like and the fact that we are ahead of schedule. I think Rachel and I had a lengthy exchange the other day around whilst the trend is positive, it's simply not available to us to try and kind of chance this and say, look, I think we're going to be okay, so we'll open it up now. You don't get to understand the true nature of the effect of the decisions you make for 2 to 3 weeks after you make them. That's just the nature of this thing. That latency is a really significant issue.
There are members of your caucus who want more heads to roll, so Labor MPs. They think that Lisa Neville and Martin Pakula have more questions to answer.
Well, Samaya, if you're putting it to me that someone's put that to you, then by all means, write a column about it. But I'm not going to get involved in that. Like, seriously, I'm not going to be getting involved in that sort of discussion. That's not appropriate. I've never done that before. and I'm not about to start doing it now.
Those two
2020
ministers have
is
your
a very strange year. This is a year like no other, but I don't think I'll be getting into that sort of stuff.
Those two ministers have your absolute confidence.
Yes,
and
yes, absolutely.
if they did decide to resign, do you think that would have been the appropriate decision to make?
Well, there's a few hypotheticals twisted there into a kind of a question. That's not right, Samaya,
It's a
seriously.
question. It's, if they decided to resign, do you think that would have been an appropriate decision to make?
They haven't. So I'm not quite sure what the question is.
Premier,
You've asked me, do I have confidence? I have confidence, yes. If I didn't, then they wouldn't be ministers. It's very, very simple.
Will have to leave their role as a result of the hotel quarantine inquiry. Do you think at this stage, having read all the material you did and prepare for your performance,
Well, Matt,
that there's any need for them to go?
Matt, I'm grateful for you giving me credit for having read all the material. I can freely admit to you I've not read 200,000 pages of documents. The Board of Inquiry has, though, and whilst I made sure that I prepared appropriately so that I could give factual, correct answers, but also answers that might assist the board in the work they're doing, I'm not going to prejudge. I'm not going to prejudge what they might find. A, they haven't made those findings yet, and B, they almost certainly will have all manner of information that I don't have. That's why the board was set up.
Premier, how did you come to select? Premier, how did you come
Foley
to select Minister Foley for the job of Health Minister?
Sorry, James?
How did you come to select Minister Foley for the job of Health Minister?
I rang him and asked him, and he said yes.
Why was he the person you rang and
Because
asked?
as a DHHS minister who has significant experience in this portfolio, in broad terms, as the mental health minister, I thought he was an outstanding choice. That's why I rang him and asked him, and he said yes, and he'll be sworn in soon. And he'll do in this portfolio exactly what he's done in all of the different portfolios he's held. He'll work hard, and he'll do a very, very good job. If I wasn't certain of that, James, then I wouldn't have made that phone call.
Was he the first person you rang and asked?
Honestly, I have many discussions with many different colleagues, and the minister is going to do an outstanding job.
So
An
he
outstanding
wasn't your
job.
first choice?
No, that's not correct, Rachel. That is not a correct inference for you to draw from anything I've said today, and that is factually not right.
Just in terms of the hotel inquiry, are you committed to staying in your position as Premier regardless of what they come down with when they release their final report?
I'm committed to the job that I've got, and it's a very, very significant job, and I work hard every day to make sure that I do the best that I possibly can. That's what I'm focused on. What I'll do after the Board of Inquiry's report comes down is I will take the action necessary to make sure that these sorts of errors can never happen again. That's the role I've got. I can't presuppose what those recommendations will be though, Matt, and I don't think it's appropriate for me to speculate on them, other than to say I think it's almost certain that there will be certain actions, there'll be things that need to happen, and I'll make sure they do.
Premier, Jenny Mikakos says it's clear that there were matters that her department should have briefed her on and they didn't, that she's ultimately accountable as minister and she's resigning. You've said that it should be clear who was responsible for setting up hotel quarantine, and you've acknowledged that it's not. Shouldn't you be taking responsibility for the fact that no one in the government or the public service has briefed you, let alone taken public responsibility for putting private security guards in hotel quarantine and ensuring that appropriate infection control safeguards were in place, and shouldn't you resign?
No, I don't think I've dealt with that. In terms of, I just want to make a broader point. Just because through the production of documents and the giving of evidence, we don't have an obvious answer to many of the questions that saw the Board of Inquiry established, that does not for a moment mean that the board won't make findings about many of those issues. That's the nature of their work. And that's why I'll wait just these few weeks to get what I'm confident will be a well-considered and comprehensive report.
Isn't the very fact that as the boss of this system you don't have those answers yourself a failing on your part though?
No, I don't accept that at all. And it's rather circular. On that test, then I wouldn't have established inquiry. The inquiry's been established because there are answers that need to be they need to be there. They aren't. They may be though when the Board of Inquiry makes its findings. So whilst I know it is particularly frustrating for you and for me that some of those questions can't, and Victorians, that those questions can't be answered, the board may well draw conclusions. The board may well come to some of these matters. That's entirely a matter for them.
Premier, today should have been the AFL Grand Final day of fun and celebration for the city, but you know, because of that, the second waves occurred and the outbreaks have occurred. What responsibility do you and the government take for that?
For the
second wave?
Well, Simon, I think I've been abundantly clear for a lengthy period of time that I'm ultimately accountable for the decisions and the performance of the government. That's the job I have. I've been, I would hope, pretty frank with you about that for a lengthy period of time. So I think I've answered your question. Our focus is not on what might have occurred today or yesterday. It's about what occurs tomorrow, and that is things we can change, things we can influence, things that our hard work and the amazing performance of every Victorian, that's what we are focused on.
Can I go back to Richard's earlier point of the Crisis Council of Cabinet? You said that decisions need to be taken quickly in the middle of the pandemic, and
yes.
The CCC allows that. The reason we found ourselves in this situation is because of the hurried decisions that were taken at the start of the pandemic, particularly in relation to hotel quarantine. I guess, is there not a reason to expand this Crisis Council of Cabinet to have more input and for the decisions to be less
No,
rushed?
Samaya, and I don't necessarily accept the conclusion that you've drawn. They're not conclusions that are for me, or might I say for you to draw. They're matters for the board to come to, and they may well do that.
Are you confident?
I really, the notion that, I just want to be clear with you, Samaya, though, the notion that cabinet committees are a new thing, they aren't. There are many cabinet committees, and they sometimes comprise 8 members, sometimes they comprise less, sometimes they comprise more. Cabinet committees and different workflows, you could just as easily call it a meeting of coordinating ministers. That was a group that existed long before this. So again, I don't know that there's much served by having debates about cabinet committee structures. The structure's in place, it's not changing, and we're going to be focused not on so much the membership of different groups within the cabinet, but making sure that we deliver the strategy that the entire cabinet has endorsed, which is get the numbers low, keep them low, and then open up safely and stay open. That's what we are focused on.
Can I just ask on a different topic of protesters?
Yes.
Your comments on, I guess, the amount of police that have been in the city today for very little people. It seems to be an extraordinary use of police, perhaps a waste of police resources, and your comments on people.
Chanel, I've not been in the city today, so I'll take your word for it. But I haven't actually seen some of the things that you're describing. I did get a report that there were perhaps less people protesting rather than more. That's a good thing. I wouldn't want anything I said to be a criticism of the operational decisions the police have made about how many people should be there. Police are doing very important work in very difficult circumstances. I thank them, all of them, for the work they're doing, and I thank their families as well for the sacrifices that they make. Without those sacrifices, that service is simply not possible. So to every member of Victoria Police and every police family, I say thank you for the work you're doing, and to anyone, even a smaller number than perhaps expected, who protested today, I'll just say, don't do that. Do not protest. It is not safe. It is not lawful, and it is only conducive with potentially spreading this virus. We want less coronavirus cases, not more. And protesting, regardless of what you're protesting for or against, is neither smart nor lawful. It's a selfish thing to do, particularly when we're so close to taking further steps and moving every day, every single day, moving closer to the COVID normal that we all want, so that when we get to 2021, it's a year that is totally different to 2020.
You've lost 4 ministers in 3 months. Are you confident that your cabinet makeup at the moment is the most appropriate to serve Victorians?
Yes, I am, Samaya.
You said
Otherwise, that wouldn't be the makeup. It'd be a different makeup, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but you've obviously had to get rid of them, particularly Adam Somyurek, who was brought back into Cabinet after being, sacked from Cabinet.
Well, might I boldly venture that Mr Somyurek's absence from Cabinet has not diminished the Cabinet, if I might put it in those terms, or the work of the Cabinet. You raised him, I didn't, but I will observe that.
Sorry, did you say you would be elevating someone else into cabinet, or have you not made that decision?
There will be a replacement for.
There
will be a full contingent, and I'll have more to say about that soon.
And does that come from the upper house with the numbers?
I believe that is the
Yep.
case,
And will that be
for the purposes of constitutional certainty.
and will that be from the same?
We've been there before. We won't be going back to that place.
Will that be from the same faction as Ms Mikakos?
Well, the caucus will make a decision, as they always do.
Premier, there are reports today that since the 1st of August there have been at least 12 reports made to the Victorian Government of positive cases among staff at the 2 quarantine hotels that we still have running. I think they're open for vulnerable community members
Yes.
who might have COVID or need to isolate. Are casual and contract staff still involved in hotel quarantine? How many of them have tested positive for coronavirus? And what's the government done in terms of tracing whether or not they caught the virus from guests?
I'm happy to come back to you on all those matters. The issue around the wildly infectious nature of this, I think, is well known, and there are issues that come directly from that. We've seen, for instance, I reported to you just a moment ago that there are 72 healthcare workers who are active cases, and off our most contemporary analysis of not those 72 but the trend, it'd be fair to assume that at least 50 of those will have contracted the virus in a work setting. Anybody who's working in environments where there is a large number of positive cases, there are obvious risks there. But as to the specifics that you've raised, I'm happy to chase that up.
Yeah, I mean, are you concerned, given what we've learnt from hotel quarantine, that we still have contract casual workers?
Well, let me come back to you as to the accuracy of that comment. I don't have all the detail to hand in terms of those 2 hotels that you referenced. This is a program that's been reset. It's a different program in that it's not dealing with international travellers. In the main, there may be 1 or 2 where there are compassionate issues and things of that nature, but it's mainly dealing with vulnerable people, and their vulnerability can relate to their circumstances or somebody else in their home, where if they were to try and isolate at home, they might well give it to everybody else in the house, and a number of those people may have underlying conditions, all of those sorts of issues. So leave that with me and I'll have someone come back to you.
Sorry, just to clarify, did Jenny Mikakos quit by text effectively? She
No,
texted you?
no, she'd written to the governor, as is.
The first she told you of it was via text?
No, I had the letter from. I was informed as to the action she had taken. I was asked a question, have I spoken to her? And I indicated to you no, but for the purposes of completeness, she had sent a text to me some hours after that.
Did she try? And
I was well aware of the steps she'd taken.
Did she try and call you last night? Did you have a missed call from her?
No. Although I was on the phone quite a bit about all manner of different things, but no, I don't believe so.
Did the steps she took come as a surprise to you after the evidence you gave yesterday?
I don't know that this is a consequence of evidence I gave yesterday. I don't know that there's a link. I gave evidence that was under oath.
She said there's a link.
Well, then you'll need to speak to her about how it is she came to that view. I really can't offer anything more than that. I gave evidence yesterday, a statement that had been prepared well before then, but to which I attested yesterday, was made available to the inquiry, and I don't necessarily think I can add much more than that. Have we come?
No,
Oh.
James Molino hasn't had a go.
Well, Samaya, if
He's
you're
travelled
wanting to
hella
give the
an
Deputy
hour and a
Premier a
half.
go, then you can, or I can call for any further questions. If there are no further questions, being no doubt, I will see you tomorrow.